Hi, this is Pamela from the Fiber Sprite, and today I'm going to share an updated tutorial on our spinners multi-tool. So we have, as you can see here, 5 different spinners multi-tools. We have the original multi-tool, we have a sheep, an alpaca, a bunny, and then we have the ultimate, which has just one more main feature, and it has a couple of extra hole sizes. So I'm going to use the ultimate to show all of the different features of the multi-tools and kind of how to use them. So the first thing that we have is a little bit of a fiber prep tool. So these are different hole sizes that you can use as a diz. And what that means is you can create your own top or roving. So top is if it's been combed, so this is a fiber comb, and all the fibers stay parallel to each other. If it's carded, that would create more of a roving preparation. So I've got some alpaca, and this would be pretty easy actually to pull into roving by hand without the aid of a diz. But what a diz does is it really helps you keep things nice and even. So I'm going to pull it through the hole size that I choose, and you'd be surprised how much roving could fit through even the really small holes, but I'm using a larger hole so it's a little bit easier to see. And so you pull gently and then push. Pull and push. It's a little bit easier if you have something to hold down your tool, but for the ease of the video, I haven't done that. So this is basically like drafting your yarn or pre-drafting your fiber, into a really consistent length so that you can then spin it. And that will help you be more consistent in your spinning. You do want to avoid getting large clumps in the hole. If that happens, it does have a tendency to get stuck. But that's using it as a diz. And I'm not going to go through with all this fiber just for the sake of the length of this video. So the next aspect that we have is the wraps per inch tool, that you can check your wraps per inch as you're spinning. So each of these numbers represents the number of wraps per inch. The main thing here is to be consistent with yourself. So I've got some finished plied yarn here that I'm going to check the wraps per inch on and just give an example of how much different your measurement can be depending on how you hold the yarn. So I've got here, if I am not putting this under any tension at all, that's giving me a measurement somewhere in the 16 to 18 wraps per inch range. Now if I pull it really tight, if it's under tension, that's making it thinner, and we're closer to 28 wraps per inch. So when you are spinning at your wheel and you pull out your yarn that you've made to check your wraps per inch, it's going to naturally want to be under a little bit of tension because you've pulled it. So if you want to get the most accurate reading, do it with less tension. So pull your yarn out from the wheel, it's under tension, and then release the tension. And it can help to hold your thumb or another finger against the yarn so that it's not going wild, and the other hand can hold it so that there's no tension, so you get that more accurate reading. Again, and also remember that you are going to have different readings for your singles and then for your plies. So the example that I gave here is on a plied sample, but here we have an unplied piece of yarn. that, you know, if I take the reading is at, again, we're somewhere in the 16 reps per inch range, 16 to 18 reps per inch. Once I ply this, it's going to get thicker, and how I ply it is going to impact my final yarn. How much twist, how bouncy it is going to impact how thick or thin it will ultimately be. So do remember that this is not necessarily your finished yarn. This is not necessarily your finished yarn if you're planning on plying it. Be sure to keep that in mind and take that into account when you're taking your reps per inch readings. So next we have the twist angle, and there are different ways that some makers represent twist angle. We have a standard protractor, and if you hold it so that it's facing up and down, you also have your S and your Z. So when you're looking at fiber that hasn't been spun at all, I've got some roving here, and hopefully you can see, because I've included different colors, there's some contrast in there. There is no twist in this roving, right? It is straight up and down. So if I hold it parallel to the 0, that's my angle reading. Now, as soon as I start adding any twist, we start getting an angle. And that's where we're going to take our twist readings. So this isn't yarn, but it's easier to see. So I have maybe about 30 degrees of twist. And what I'm looking at, so see, here I'm adding even more twist to that. Okay, so what I'm looking at, okay, so now I'm more at 45. So if we see right here, those stripes of light gray and that stripe of black, and that's lining up, if I'm holding parallel to the 0, it's lining up, that black stripe is lining up pretty well with the 45 angle. If I let a little twist out, remember this isn't really yarn yet, it's getting a little closer to that 30. So you're gonna, if you're interested in checking your twist angle, that's how you're gonna use this tool. Now the S and the Z are just there to remind you whether you have S twist or Z twist. And that is the direction of the spinning. And if you're plying, you're typically going to be plying back in the opposite direction. So once this is plied, the S twist will become Z twist. This part of the tool is really helpful if you are trying to replicate another yarn. So when maybe you have something in your stash that you really like how it handles, and so understanding the twist angle is going to be helpful for you in getting a new yarn that's closer to that old yarn. Here's another example. So here's a plied yarn. It's a little bit underplied. So I'm gonna, if you see how there's those gaps in there, that's telling me that it's a little bit underplied. It's not holding together as well as I would like it to. And that is showing me that, yeah, it's about 15 degrees of twist. So if I were to want, this is a ply back sample. So that's telling me that maybe I would want, when I go to ply this yarn, to make it a little bit over plied. And that would create a nice bouncy yarn. And that would be closer to maybe I like that 60 degrees of twist. See how much that changes the yarn? So we've got kind of a limp yarn here. And if we add more twist to it, that angle increases and it gets more bouncy and a kind of a chubbier yarn, right? So that's the twist angle tool. We also, on the Ultimate Multi-Tool, we have a little ruler here with 1/4 and 1/2 inch and 1 inch and 2 inch markings. And one way you can use this is to check your bumps or your twists per inch. So this is also a tool that you might use in maintaining consistency. So here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 over 2 inches divided by 2 would get me to about 4 bumps per inch. So if I'm trying to keep this consistency in this yarn, then that is a measurement that I might check on as I'm plying the yarn. Now, do remember that every time you're spinning, that is not your final yarn. So when you're spinning your singles, you're getting one yarn, and when you ply, you're getting another yarn. And there's an essential final step, which is washing your yarn. And there are lots of different resources on washing your yarn out there. They're all good. There's many different ways to wash your yarn. But one thing to remember is that when you wash your yarn, you're going to lose some twist and you're frequently going to get some bloom. So your final measurements of your final yarn may end up often being significantly larger than, remember that 18 wraps per inch that I had on my singles, it might go to a 14. And all of that is going to be impacted by how I wet finish. So that's just another variable in your spinning, so something to keep in mind. Thanks so much. If you have other questions about how to use a spinner's multi-tool, I'd love to hear them.